It wasn't long after I moved into my brand new house that I heard a peculiar noise emanating from somewhere within. I had just finished unpacking the final box after the move and was standing in my kitchen sipping a beer when I heard it. It sounded like crying. It was such a soft sound that had I been doing anything other than standing motionless in my kitchen, I probably wouldn't have heard it. My first thought was that maybe there was someone outside my kitchen window, someone who had gotten hurt. I took a few steps and peeked through the curtain. I couldn't see anyone, though the way my kitchen window is angled, it's hard to see anything at all. I set my glass down and wandered outside. After spending around 20 minutes circling my house, I couldn't find the source of the crying, though it was only then that I foolishly realized that I could no longer hear it. I walked back inside and entered my kitchen. I listened for a moment, but the sound had vanished. I thought perhaps whoever it was that had been crying had left the area and gone home. That night, long after I had gone to bed, I had been stirred from my sleep for some unknown reason. It's hard to explain, but it felt like there were eyes on me, as if someone had entered my room and was just looking at me. I sat up in bed and gazed around, expecting to see a set of eyes looking back at me, though I saw nothing. Once more, the feeling didn't feel malicious, almost like a curious person reading over one's shoulder. After a few moments of looking around my empty room, that strange feeling faded away. I went to bed and had no more occurrences the rest of the night. A day or two passed by and I was sitting in my bedroom watching TV. I had paused the show I was watching to go use the bathroom, though when I stood up from my chair, I could hear it again. The faint whimper of someone crying. I wandered around my house trying my best to locate the source of the sound. It was strange. One moment I could hear the crying from my bedroom, then the kitchen. Then it would vanish for a few minutes. It would then reappear somewhere else. Now, I've never been one for the paranormal. Not that there's anything wrong with believing in that stuff, it's just I had never personally experienced anything like it before. Surprisingly, when I started doing some research, I found that wailing spirits are in fact a thing. That ghosts will act sometimes in accordance to their deaths, or their past lives, and that emotion translates through feelings, sounds, and sometimes even smells. Even though I didn't wholly believe in ghosts, I couldn't deny that what I was experiencing was not normal. I looked for some suggestions in dealing with ghosts next. A lot of people told me to contact my local exorcist, which made me laugh. Some suggested that I burn some sage around my house to cleanse the area. As I was reading more and more, I felt that same feeling I had felt when I was asleep, like somebody was reading over my shoulder. I spun quickly in my chair, but saw nothing. I decided that would be enough research for the day. I turned off my computer, made some dinner, and went to bed. That night, I was once again stirred from my sleep, but it wasn't a strange feeling that had awoken me this time. It was a noise. The crying. It was louder this time than it had ever been. I sat up immediately and looked around. That's when I saw it. Or rather, her. It was a young woman, a teenager, maybe younger, sitting in the corner of my bedroom. She was hugging her knees to her chest and sobbing uncontrollably. I just stared at her for a couple of minutes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The girl didn't look like a ghost. She looked like just a normal person, yet something about her was off. I quietly whispered, "Who are you?" And when I did, her crying stopped, though she never raised her head from her knees. I then asked, "How did you get in here?" She didn't respond. She didn't so much as flinch. I grabbed my phone from my nightstand and almost dialed the police, but I stopped when I looked back and she was nowhere to be found. I set my phone down and got up to search for the girl. I looked all over, but I couldn't find her. I even double-checked to make sure all my windows and doors were locked. I decided that if this happened one more time, I would go out and buy some sage to, quote-unquote, cleanse my house. It didn't take long for that to become a reality, though. 3 more days passed since the night that I had seen the girl in my room. I hadn't heard the crying once since that day. I thought maybe, just maybe, that this whole incident had finally gone away. Then the night came, and I was sleeping soundly until around 1 a.m. I heard that familiar sound echoing once again in my room. My eyes cracked open and I looked over to the corner to see if the girl was there, but she wasn't. Then I heard it again, and this time I could make out where the sound was coming from. Slowly, my head lifted, and I saw her. She was sitting on my ceiling, directly above my head. She was still in that balled-up position, her knees to her chest, and she was softly weeping. I quickly rolled out of bed and backed up against the wall, not wanting to take my eyes off her. She was like an insect, sitting there as if nothing was wrong. I wasn't sure what to do. I thought about just making a run for it, but she didn't seem evil, just strange. I called out to her once again. "What do you want?" Same as before, her crying stopped, but this time she raised her head. Her face was horrid. It was a bloody mess of torn flesh and exposed bone. She looked at me with soulless black eyes that conveyed sorrow, fear, pain, and loneliness. It was hard to see through the wounds on her face, but I could tell that what was left of her cheeks were stained by tears. I asked her once again, "What are you doing here?" She just looked at me silently. I started to get a bad feeling about this. I walked out of my room, shutting the door behind me. After waiting a few minutes, I cracked the door open to see if the girl was still there, and she wasn't. I sighed heavily as I double-checked every nook and cranny of my room before climbing back into bed. The next morning, after I finished showering and getting ready for the day, I went out and searched for some sage. Apparently, you can't just use any old stack of sage to cleanse spirits from the area. It must be a specific assortment of dried herbs bundled together. The only place that happened to sell these types of things was a small, dingy apothecary on the other side of town. The store itself was relatively normal aside from the shopkeeper. It was an older woman. She had long gray hair down to her knees. As I was purchasing the bundle, she made a passing remark about using some of these for her late husband. I was still on edge from the previous night, so I only managed a half smile and a nod. Just before I exited the shop, the old woman said to me, "Goodbye." But it didn't feel like she was talking to me. I pushed the interaction out of my mind, got in my car, and headed home. Not long after I entered my house, I retrieved the sage bundle. I ignited it with a match and let it smolder. I walked from room to room, letting the smoke plume and dissipate. After about an hour, I had cleansed each room of my house. I think. To be honest, I didn't feel any different. I just hoped everything would be over with and that I could get on with living my normal life. Then, that night, something happened. I was laying in bed, unable to fall asleep. Something felt wrong in my house. I laid there staring at the clock, watching the minutes turn into hours. I hadn't heard a single whimper from the girl, yet I couldn't figure out why I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. Then, I saw something out of the corner of my eye that drew my attention to my bedroom window. It was that girl. She was standing outside of my window staring at me. I sat up and felt a chill run down my spine. I thought I had cleansed her from this place. I stood from my bed and took a few steps towards the window. The girl's face was back to normal. No cuts, no gashes, no bone. Just a plain young woman's face. She opened her mouth and fog began to appear on the outside of my window. She gently raised a finger to the glass and wrote a message backwards so I could read it. It's inside. Run. Suddenly, I heard my bedroom door creak open behind me. I felt my entire body lock up at that point. Previously, when the girl was here, it was more strange than scary. But now, something else had taken her place, and I couldn't stop my body from shaking with fear. I slowly turned my head and saw a shadow stretching from the floor to the ceiling, moving along my wall. My eyes glanced back to the window and the girl was gone. I inhaled deeply, turned, and sprinted to my door. But before I could make it, my bedroom door slammed in my face. I fought hard against the knob, but it felt welded shut. Panicking, I did the only other thing I could think of. I grabbed the chair from my desk and threw it through my bedroom window. The glass shattered on impact, and I jumped out into my backyard. I've been staying with a friend of mine for the past few days. I'm not sure what is happening with my house or why, but I have a theory. I think that girl was being tormented by that shadowy spirit, but she was keeping my house safe. When I cleansed it, I had banished her from the house, and basically gave that shadow a vacancy sign. I could be wrong, but that's what I believe happened. I don't know, but I think I'm going to spend the next few days searching for an exorcist, and buying a hell of a lot more sage.